Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Purposeful Powerhouse Podcast. Have you ever found yourself saying something like, "Yeah, I've tried meditation, I just can't do it," or "Yeah, it just doesn't really seem to work for me," or getting frustrated when you sit down to meditate because your brain is bouncing all over the place like a ping pong, flying back and forth at the world championships of ping ponging, or pacing mentally back and forth like a worried mother pacing, waiting for their child to get home late at night. And so, if you've experienced that, A, you're not alone. B, most humans have. C, it's really common for busy brained entrepreneur creative types to experience that. And I certainly have. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But we're going to talk about some of the benefits of meditation and share three things that you should know that might really kind of shift this for you and help you, as well as three things that you can try that might begin to expedite the journey into the amazing world of meditation. So, first of all, what is meditation? Well, traditionally, meditation is learning to focus your mind on a one pointed focus. And so that can be done in a variety of ways and using a lot of different tools. So that's something that happens quite a bit, is that we have this sort of classic view of what meditation is and should look like. And that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And although the practice of meditation is ancient and rich in tradition and is woven into many different wisdom traditions around the world and cultures around the world, you can do it in so many different ways. But the understanding that modern science, neuroscience, the evolution of how our brain develops as well as how it ages. So, all of these different practices and studies are starting to really recognize the importance of meditation because of the beneficial effects that it has on our brain. And so that's actually how I came to shift my relationship with meditation. So let's talk about that, and then we'll go back into the benefits and the tips and the tools and all those beautiful things. So I admittedly avoided meditation for a really long time because I quote unquote couldn't do it. I tried, right? And my brain was just all over the place. I literally felt like I was just pacing from thought to thought. And the reality is that the human mind has anywhere between 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, which I did the math, is about 42 thoughts a minute. Okay. So, and that's for the 60,000. So it's even more if you have the 70,000 thoughts a day. It's a lot, right? It's like we don't have to even make it bigger. It's still a lot at 42 thoughts every minute. And so if we expect that we're going to go from, that many miles an hour, that many thoughts a minute to absolutely none, it's just not going to happen. But for me, I was so frustrated by it. I just couldn't do it. I was like, I don't know, whatever, I'm not going to do it. But then I had this discongruency. Not sure if that's a word, but I felt out of integrity because there I was, a yoga teacher that wasn't practicing meditation. And the ultimate goal of yoga is to unify the mind, the body, and the spirit so that we can meditate. The physical asana practices are tools to get us to that point, and yet I wasn't practicing that very essential component of the practice. And so I felt really out of alignment with all of it. And, to be honest, my saboteurs were having a heyday, and they made me want to feel like a failure, although I knew that I wasn't, because we're always learning, we're always growing. There's always, wins and losses, et cetera, et cetera. But I just felt completely out of integrity. And so I just didn't do it, right? I didn't do it. I avoided it, and I beat myself up about it, and that's silly, but I did. And so no judgment around that until my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, developed Lewy body dementia. So that's a type of dementia where there's protein deposits in the brain and affects the structure and function of the brain. And she started to lose her memory, her personality shifted. There was a lot of significant changes. And so it was really scary, right? It was really scary. And me being me, of course, lifelong learner, I started to do research and look into what we can do to help our brain as we age. And I don't know if you know this from other episodes, but my background was in gerontology. So that's the study of aging. And so this is always something that I've been curious about is how can we boost the quality of our life as we are aging? Because we're all aging, right? No one's getting out alive. That's the reality of life. And so what could we do to either, reduce the structural changes to the brain to ideally prevent age-related decline and other cognitive issues like Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. So I started to do research, and it turns out, are you going to be surprised by this? Probably not, considering the topic of this episode, but meditation. And actually the combination of cardiovascular exercise, yay, cardio, and meditation is the best combination, because cardiovascular exercise actually stimulates the growth of brain cells, and then meditation helps them to mature. So as we age, different parts of our brain, specifically the hippocampus, is affected by age-related decline. And so we start to see a reduction in the function of the neurons in that part of the brain. They start to kind of, they age, and they start to essentially deteriorate and die off. But if we're doing cardio and we're growing new brain cells and we're practicing meditation, i.e., we are challenging those brain cells, then we actually see beneficial changes in a very short amount of time to that area of the brain, the hippocampus, as well as the whole brain, because we see whole brain communication. We start to develop new neural pathways, and especially in the parts of the brain associated with memory, emotion, personality, they are all benefited significantly by meditation. So of course, me, highly motivated now. I'm like, all right, well, meditation it is, up, up and away. But yet I still come up against that challenge of, I just can't do it, quote unquote. I can't meditate. Like, it's just insane in there. I don't know, I've been to Thailand, and unfortunately, this is kind of a random story, but in Thailand, we went to this island. And when we arrived on the island, a bunch of monkeys ran out to the beach. I was like, "Ooh, monkeys!" And then the guys on the boat start cracking Pepsis, and they start handing out cans of Pepsis to these monkeys. And all of a sudden, you could see that the monkeys were like, give me it, give me it. You know how when you're waiting at a coffee shop and you can see people first thing in the morning getting a bit edgy because they haven't had their caffeine? These monkeys were addicted to the caffeine and the sugar. And so they start chugging the Pepsis. And then all of a sudden they got all crazy, right? They got all crazy and they're running all over the place. They're all jacked up on sugar and caffeine. And that's what my brain, it was rather sad. And it was, it was sad to observe. And it was sad to think that they were addicted to, sugar and caffeine. And that, anyways, that's side note. I tell you that because that's what it felt like in my brain when I would try to meditate. It was like caffeinated monkeys all over the place, just screaming and leaping and all the things. And so I was still having that issue. And so I went to my teacher and I asked her, I said, I can't seem to really quiet and focus my mind and meditate. And she said, well, maybe you haven't found your stick. And I said, perhaps I haven't. And for those of you that have read my book, The Warrior's Journey, I share this story in that book about finding your stick. And I said, no, I don't know that I have found my stick. And she said, well, the mind is like an elephant. It needs to be given tools in order to stay focused. So if you think of when you've seen pictures of elephants, or maybe in the wild or in captivity, you often see elephants holding on to something. It's often they're holding on to a stick, or the trunk. Their trunk is holding the tail of the elephant in front of them, because elephants are extremely intelligent animals. By nature, they're very curious. And so their handlers often will give them something to hold on to, so they're not using their trunks to grab at things. And so she said, your mind is like the elephant. And in order for you to focus your mind, you need to give it something to do, something to hold on to. And I thought, well, that's a beautiful analogy. And so perhaps I haven't found the stick yet. And so my point is that if you've tried to just sit down and watch the breath, and your mind is like crazy monkeys on caffeine, like mine is, then maybe you haven't found your stick yet. Because this is one of the things to know about meditation and about the mind, is that it's the nature of our mind to be busy. And when we sit down to focus our mind, instantly, it's going to want to rebel against that. And the challenge is to choose a stick or choose a point of focus, right? So, for example, if you're using that classical example of following the breath, we're focusing on the breath. We observe that, and anytime we notice that we see a thought coming, or that we've already started thinking, is we let the thought go and we keep coming back to the breath. I equate it to training a puppy, right? You tell the puppy to sit and stay, and then you walk away and you look back, and sometimes it's still staying there, sometimes you look back and it's like chewing on the wall. you know so maybe you go back and you tell it to sit and you give it a toy, right? And so now you give it something to play with or to do, and then it might still be playing with it when you check on it again, or now it might be chewing on its tail. And so it's a matter of recognizing that that's the nature of the mind. And the nature of the mind, both of the ego mind and the actual mind of its survival based focus, is that it wants to keep us exactly where we are, in our zone of familiarity, in our quote unquote comfort zone. And so anytime we are challenging ourselves, stretching ourselves, expanding ourselves, like we are doing in meditation, then it will resist that, because it's unfamiliar. And because it's allowing you to shift these patterns, right? And shift these old ways of being, of getting caught in the cycles of self-defeating talk, or whatever it is that you get tripped up in, or the anxiety or the worry or whatever that's tripping you up in that particular moment, is that we are now getting to begin to shift those patterns, right? And structurally, we are shifting those patterns, because when we catch the mind in that busy thought and we pause, we're coming back to a place of centered awareness, we're breathing, and we're actually, as you learned before, we're activating different parts of our brain, and we're stimulating those parts of our brain. So we are developing other neural pathways, and we're really, truly shifting yourself at the deepest level. And so that's actually where the benefit of meditation comes from, is the observation of the distraction and then reining your mind back in. This is called effortful learning, in that you're learning something through effort, i.e., it might be difficult sometimes. And if you have a rather busy brain that's binga bunga bunga all over the place, you'll get to practice that frequently. Okay, so that's where we get to just visualize your mind like a puppy, and we're going to train it over and over and over. Sometimes it will sit and stay quietly. Sometimes, you might get so relaxed that you actually fall asleep, and so it's just like a puppy in that sense. So that's the first thing to know, is that's the nature of our mind, to be busy. And so we just know going in that we're not going to go from 60,000 thoughts every minute to none. And that's, if we're not thinking, then maybe we've reached that samadhi and the enlightenment and the Buddha-like tendencies, but probably not going to happen. So don't worry about that. So the thing is that we want to just acknowledge that that's the nature of the mind, right? And that when we hear ourselves saying things like, oh, I just can't do it, I'm no good at this, that's the saboteurs, and that's a self-protective mechanism kicking in to keep you from stretching yourself, to keep you from growing, to keep you from tapping into your unlimited potential that's available to you when you are in that place of connected awareness, and when you're able to focus in on that inner guidance, that inner stillness, the essence of who you truly are. That is what we are accessing through meditation and through the yoga practice. Okay, so those are the first two things I really wanted you to know, because that's the mind will become very active when you are really centering, because it's feeling threatened, right? And so it's important that we give it a tool, just like the elephant, right? We give it a tool so that when we drop the stick, metaphorically, we go and we pick it back up again, and we're cultivating presence. And we do that compassionately, right? And we're not in there judging ourselves for dropping the stick over and over. It's just, that's the effortful learning, is we're training the mind just like we do a puppy. And that really teaches us to be compassionate and be patient, and to keep trying. Because that's the third thing that I wanted to share, is that small steps will lead to big shifts. And sometimes, if you're like me and you're an all-in sort of personality, you like to, go for it. And you're like, all right, well, I've heard meditation's really good for my brain. I did my cardio. Now I'm going to do my meditation. I'm going to do this for an hour. And then we can't do it, and we get frustrated and we give it up completely, which is what I did, right? And so what we want to look at here is that it's the nature of our mind to continually wander. And so it's going to wander approximately half of the time. And that's on a good day. And so just knowing that and recognizing that. And so when you catch the mind, you're cultivating self command, right? Which is one of the muscles of mental fitness that we talk about inside mental fitness, or positive intelligence, which is one of the tools I use. And so we want to just observe it, catch it, come on back, and then try again, right? Try again, try again. And so it's more about the consistency of our practice than the duration. And so it's just like in with yoga and exercise, it's better for you to do a little bit more often than to do a lot rarely. Okay? And so think about that. It can be as simple as, okay, I want to get into a meditation habit. Then that's what we do in mental fitness is we take little 2-minute breaks throughout the day, 2-minute power pauses, and focus on something in our body. So maybe it's the breath, maybe it's movement, maybe it's rubbing your fingertips together, and you're really intently focusing on that sensation. So you're meditating on that sensation so that when your mind is distracted, you can recognize it and gently bring it back. Right? So cultivating self-command. So that's a very important thing to think about is small changes lead to big results. Consistency is better than a long duration practice. So then now that you have those things in mind and more of an understanding of how you can be a little more compassionate with yourself, because ultimately that's the end goal of yoga, right? Is self-compassion and self-love rather than cracking the whip about how good you should be at meditating. So then that was one of my other stories, and maybe it's yours too, of like, I'm just bad at this. I just can't do it. Maybe you haven't found your stick yet. And for people that are used to being very active in that you got a lot going on. You got your phone, you got your computer, you got like 20 different windows. I mean, on one browser. I mean, that's an interesting thing in the entrepreneur community is having like, who has the most windows? Who has the most tabs open on their computer? It's not necessarily a prize for the most, but we tend to open a lot of tabs. And so maybe it's that you haven't found something that gives you enough to do so that you are very present, because your mind's used to kind of being involved in a lot of projects simultaneously, although multitasking is not really a thing because it actually uses more time and energy from the brain than if we just focus on one task. But anyways, that's a side note. I got distracted there, so coming back. Maybe you haven't found something that allows you to have enough that you're focusing on to be able to quiet your mind, to be able to bring it to a one-pointed focus of meditation. So perhaps you want to try something different, right? There's many different ways to meditate, many paths as this up the mountain, as my teacher likes to say. So for many of my clients and my community members, it's challenging for us to sit still, especially if you, like me, are neurodivergent and you have a lot of energy. And, why not try to stay present through movement? So in my program that's called Rise and Vibe, we often will combine our power statements. So for example, I am powerful while we're doing our squats. So there's a lot of intricacies to performing a squat exercise properly. So we're working those layers to the movement, pressing into your heels, engaging your belly, coming up, squeezing your glutes, opening your chest, lengthening through the crown of your head. So there's a lot of layers to the squat itself. But once you're familiar with those details, then we add in an empowering statement. So that's what a power statement is as you're coming up to the top of the squat and you're squeezing your bum and you're opening your chest and you're engaging your abs and you're squeezing your legs, you're saying powerful. So we come down, we say, I am, and then powerful. I am powerful. So as we inhale, we're saying it to ourselves, I am. And as we exhale, we're either saying it mentally or out loud, powerful, right? So we breathe in, we breathe out. We add the power statement so that you're really getting that sensation. And it really keeps your mind focused, because a lot of times, when you're doing a long duration exercise like a plank or something, yes, there's a physical challenge to it, but a lot of times it's mental. And so when you can bring that element of decision and clarity and intentionality into your movement, and you're really focused on it, you increase the mind muscle connection. So you increase the firing levels of the muscle fibers. So they are really a lot more active because you're sending your prana, your energy into them, and you're squeezing them, activating them even more. That becomes a moving meditation. So that's our tip number one. Maybe you can try that. Maybe you can try a moving meditation to see if that feels any different for you. If you can really get to that experience of, there's things that you're doing to focus on so that you can experience the stillness of the present moment, right? And so you can be still mentally, but moving physically. So that's our tip number one. The second tip is, have you tried using some mantras? So mantras are sacred sounds that we repeat, right? That have been repeated for thousands of years, that are infused with vibrational energy and sound and sacred intent. And so a mantra can be really any sacred word. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a Sanskrit word or a word from another language. It can be something that's powerful to you, as long as you're using it with intention. So, when people sing hymns in church and they're using sacred words that are from their religion, that's a mantra, right? And so a mantra is a tool for the mind. And so it's repeating something over and over. And so maybe it's a sacred sound like Om or Amen or Yahweh or whatever it is for you. So breathing in and out and repeating that to yourself mentally, or even chanting it, singing it, because when we emit sound, whether we're humming or we're singing, we actually stimulate the vagus nerve, right? And so that's the highway between the mind and the body, the mind-body connection, but the main highway of your nervous system. So it's very regulating and soothing for your nervous system. So have you tried repetition of mantra? And so that one is very powerful for me, because I like the element of singing it to myself or humming it to myself. And so I use that daily. That's my morning meditation, is I use mantras, because it really just, I feel that it's really tuning me in to the sound and the energy and the vibration of that, but also really supporting me at the nervous system level, which is so important, as you know, and maybe have learned in other episodes. So that's tip number two. Maybe you try some chanting or some singing. And again, you choose whatever language, you choose whatever sacred words are really potent to you. And it helps you to quiet the mental chatter, because you're doing something. You're actively focusing on the mantra, so that you're still breathing, you're still feeling yourself sitting up tall. And that's another side note, is when you're doing it, we want to make sure we're really upright. We want to keep our central channel open, i.e. your spine, or in yoga, we call it the Sushumna. So it's the main energy channel for the nadis, which are the pathways through the body that the prana, your energy, flows through, which actually almost consistently throughout the body mirror the pathway of the nerves that you have in your body, right? So modern Western understanding of the body and the ancient Eastern understanding of the body are very, very similar, just using different words, right? So nerves and nadis, but they're essentially talking about the same thing, which is really cool. So quieting the mental chatter, making sure you're upright, you're lengthening through the crown of your head. I like to visualize a beautiful golden orb over top of me, which to me represents the creative power of the universe, all loving and compassionate and joyful and abundant, and all of the beautiful aspects to the universe. And so for you, that could be, the same. Maybe you picture a Buddha or some sort of sacred imagery that you like, or the universe or God, whatever that is for you, right? And so we're using our senses to really become very present. We're coming to our senses, if you will. Okay. And then the last thing that I would really invite for you to try, that has been really powerful for me and for many of my students and my clients, is to try some breath work before meditation. So because of its impact on the vagus nerve, which we just chatted a little bit about, it really helps to calm your mind and your body, which brings you to a place of clarity, and also really allows you to enter into the present moment, because you've essentially dialed down the activation of the nervous system, right? you're down regulating the nervous system so that you can bring yourself to a state of stillness. It's right. Instead of it being like, really loud, like the volume is up really high, whatever, on your stereo, and you turn it down and it gets quieter and quieter. That's what's happening when we do breath work. And so because of the activation of the vagus nerve. And so perhaps doing some breath work. And so that can be as simple as an even breath, inhaling for 5, exhaling for 5, or doing a box breath, which is inhaling for 5, holding for 5, exhaling for 5, holding empty for 5, if that feels safe and comfortable to you, or belly breathing, whatever. And any sort of breath technique that you are familiar with or that you want to experiment with so that you can center yourself. And essentially that's what the asana poses, the asana practice, the poses of yoga help us to do, is to dial everything down so that we can get the mind, we relax the body so much that the mind is still as well. So breath work can do that. Maybe you do yoga. And then so traditionally that's what happens is we do an asana practice, we do a pranayama practice, and then we do a meditation practice. And so it really is knowing that it's the nature of the mind to be really bing, 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 bing all over the place, is we use these tools to prime and prep ourselves to be able to focus. So maybe some breath work first. So I really hope that that was insightful for you, because there is so much incredible research that is done. The Alzheimer's Association is constantly doing studies on the benefits of meditation, as well as how it is really impactful on our mood and our ability to quiet the negative chatter in the mind. And as you learned, taking command of the mind, bringing it back over and over, allows you to be in control of the mind rather than having it just run in circles all over the place, right? And so if you're practicing that, then you're able to catch yourself in the patterns of self-sabotage. You'll be able to catch your saboteurs, or the characters in your head, the negative committee in your head that's trying to derail your evolution and your growth and your expansion. You'll be able to catch them and keep coming back to that inner guidance so that you can live from that place of intentionality. And really, meditation is one of the most powerful tools you can have to learn to think on purpose, because you're reining in that chatter so that you can be the one that is the creator of your thoughts, because you're the creator of your thoughts. But if we're just going back on these hardwired patterns of these 60,000 thoughts, most of which you had yesterday, most of which are negative because they are attempting to be self-protective, then we're just going to be living by default. And so you want to live on purpose because you're a purposeful powerhouse. So meditation is a tool that can help you to do that, right? And as we just discussed, having some movement beforehand through cardio, but also through yoga asana, that can be really helpful as well to prime and prep yourself. So that will help you to keep your body strong and powerful as well, so that you can show up from that place of groundedness and centeredness and presence, and as your favorite self, deeply aligned, truly aligned, and knowing that you are doing the most important thing of all, taking care of yourself now so that you can continue to live in a happy and healthy life for as many years as possible, right? Because we don't think about our brain very often. Did you get that pun? I'm just going to poke a little finger in it because it's kind of funny. We don't think about the brain very often. Anyway, sorry. I got to laugh because I don't know if you're laughing or not. So it's one of those things that, we sort of take for granted. It's up there doing its thing, and it's doing a damn lot for us every day. And so if we can do a little bit every day, or as often as you think about it, or as often as it fits into your schedule, to really support it at the foundational structural level, doing things like meditation, exercise, cardio, all of those things, eating well, eating your, getting a balanced nutrition, all of that stuff, getting sleep, then you're really supporting yourself at the deepest level. And so hopefully that will inspire you to explore meditation or breath work, because it is so incredibly impactful, as are you. Right. And so thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for going out and sharing your gifts with the world. I would love to be able to support you. And so if you haven't already, grabbed the free 5-minute workout that will help you to move your body and get some cardio, get some strengthening, some toning, some boosting, all of those things in, then make sure to grab that because it's in the show notes, because that's a really simple way for you to get in your body, move your body, quiet things down a little bit so you can focus your mind. So that's in the show notes, and I would love for you to grab that and check that out. And until next time, have a beautiful rest of your day and take good care of yourself. Bye-bye. Thanks for being here.